people will look at me and say, well, Tony, you've done all this stuff, your head should be this big. And I go, I've only done 100 marathons, and it took me 4 years to do 7 continents. She's done 200 marathons and only 7 days to do all 7 continents. So anything any of us come up with, there's someone else who's done it more, who's done it faster. So my name is Tony Reed. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the National Black Marathoners Association. We've been around since 2004. As I like to say, we have been blazing trails for over 20 years. Started the Black Marathoners Association. There were roughly 5 black running clubs in the U.S. Avondale Running Club in Cincinnati, Team Marathon out of Cleveland, South DeKalb Runners out of Atlanta, South Fulton Running Partners out of Atlanta. I know I'm missing one other one, but it'll come to me. So now you basically have black running clubs in virtually every city in the country, if not multiple running clubs and crews. We were the only national African American running organization. Now there are at least 3 or 4. And when we started in 2004, and Runner's World wrote an article about us in 2005, I was actually getting contacted by other organizations such as Alcoholics Anonymous, Native American organizations, all of these other organizations were questioning us about how to go about starting an African American, how to go about starting a national running organization. Now, since 2004, we've kind of had a 3-pronged approach, or 3 phases, I guess you might say, to the method to our madness over all these years. It's focused on education, training, and sustainability. On education, you're going to get an opportunity to see the impact of our educational programs, again, looking at these documentaries. The training part of it, we wanted to get more African American certified distance running coaches. Prior to about 2015, if you went to an RRCA, one of their coaching certification classes, you weren't finding any African Americans in there. Once we started promoting it, we had 2 or 3 classes with about 15 to 20 African Americans in each one of those classes. Now you're able to find African American running coaches all over the country. On the sustainability part of it, again, this is about planting seeds in communities so that running clubs can grow. Working on the education piece of it, in 2013 we started the National Black Distance Running Hall of Fame to bring attention to the accomplishments of African American runners and to provide role models for up and coming runners. The reason we started the Hall of Fame was because Andy Burford, the senior editor of Runner's World, contacted me. He was looking for this lady named Marilyn Bevans, and he thought that I may be able to find her. As I was doing this research on Marilyn Bevans, I turned around and thought that she was a white lady, because she had placed 2nd in Boston, 2nd in New York in 1977, and I'd never heard of her. And I was blown away when I saw an interview and realized that she was African American, born and raised in Baltimore. When I brought this up with their board of directors, they said, have you ever heard of a guy named Ted Corbitt? And I said, yeah, I remember reading about him in books. They said, did you realize he was African American? I go, no. Never seen a photo of him. So because of Ted Corbitt and Marilyn Bevans, we started the National Black Distance Running Hall of Fame. And again, bringing attention to these individuals, even though Ted Corbitt was one of the founders of the New York Road Runners Club and did all these great things, he had not been inducted in their Hall of Fame until we announced his induction into our Hall of Fame. And so individuals who get inducted into our Hall of Fame start getting recognized by other organizations. This is a chart. You said, oh, you weren't expecting charts. But one of the interesting questions that was asked was, so what's the impact of your documentaries? Well, this is a chart of the African American women who have broken 3 hours in a marathon. Now, between 1979, when Marilyn Bevans was the first one to do this, all the way to 2013, you're only looking at 8 people, 8 African American women born in this country breaking 3 hours in a marathon. So now we got to ask, well, what happened in 2013? We inducted her into the Hall of Fame. 2014, I actually wrote the article that featured her in Runner's World. In 2016, Shawana White sent an email to Gary Corbitt and myself asking a simple question: how many U.S.-born African-American women have ever run a marathon in under 3 hours? I didn't think it was possible to track them down. Gary Corbitt took it and went with it. And so in 2018, what has become known as the list started making its way around. And so between 1979 and 2012, 8 US-born African-American women broke 3 hours in a marathon, 8 of them in that time period. 23 broke it between 2013 and 2025. So we're able to see the impact of these documentaries on people. And we're looking at these numbers going up even more.
As a charter member of this association, did you ever think in your mind or fathom out what has evolved and is still evolving?
I could not have imagined. I mean, this is like we've been planting seeds for 20 years, and it's just a matter of just watching it take root, just watching it grow.
The very first race that we did was in St. Louis. How many? About 15 of us, not even a couple of dozen of us.
And we were actually, I was actually afraid for our very first summit that they were going to cancel the race because people were finding out Black folks gathering at a race. I mean, it was like, I was getting emails. You're talking about getting hate emails from folks all around the country, having to manage and deal with a lot of stuff that a lot of our members were just never ever aware of. But we made it through.
Yeah, and we've seen it. I mean,
if you had asked me 4 years ago if I ever imagined that we would be doing these documentaries, I'd say no. But we've been able to see the impact. That I would love to see is so Gary Corbitt started the Ted Corbitt Institute, basically doing a lot of research on African American distance runners and trying to get people to donate money and trying to get race organizations to donate money. It's like pulling teeth. I looked at the financials for I guess I can say for the New York Road Runners, their 2022 financials, where they cleared 82 or 86 million dollars, but they would not give $100,000 to Gary Corbitt to keep track of our history. And to me, and you could look at Boston and look at all the major marathons. I have tried to get money, for example, out of the Chicago Marathon. And it doesn't take very much just to do the math. If they're gonna have 40,000 runners there, and folks are paying $150 to $200.
$238.
$238.
Yeah.
245 and 255 international, and last year it was 52,150 runners. I want to say.
And the thing is, and I have spent 20 years trying to say, okay, why don't you guys put some of this money back in our community? Because when the second running boom, which was females, kind of ended, we are the ones who picked up the slack. And you started seeing more and more African Americans getting involved in distance running. And I tell them, I said, we literally in a presentation, I said, what has been happening is we bought the seeds, we bought the land, we bought the fertilizer, we're paying for everything to get watered, and you end up getting all the fruit. And not invest, not give us anything. So the thing that I would love is for them to start coming up with money, not just saying everything is great, we support what you're doing. It's like, we need money.
What motivates you to run 132 marathons? I mean, where does that come from?
Ignorance.
Don't know better.
No, the way it started out for me was, and I live in Dallas, so we have the Dallas Marathon in December and a Fort Worth Marathon, which is just about 30, 40 miles away, in February. So at the time I was married, and I couldn't justify spending money just to go someplace to run. So for 20 years, I was always running the Dallas Marathon and the Fort Worth Marathon with the clear understanding, training for the marathon in December, I would start in July and train, and that training made it so that I didn't gain weight during Thanksgiving. and then with the Cowtown Marathon in February, that took me through Christmas, New Year's, and Valentine's Day, as far as all the stuff for gaining weight. So I literally did that for 20 years, just doing those 2 marathons. And with the clear understanding that by the time I would turn 50, my kids would be out the house, they would not need me anymore for anything other than writing checks. And they were surprised when they found out that didn't happen. And so I decided the year I turned 50, I wanted to run a marathon a month, and each one had to be in a different state or country. So that took me up through knocking out, again, 12 states. And then at our summit in 2009, which is when I ran my 100th marathon, that's when I started meeting Nate from Atlanta, Fred Davis III. And these guys had run marathons in all 50 states, and Angela Ivory. She was the first African-American female to run marathons in all 50 states. So I met them, and they were like, you need to do 50 states. So just from meeting them is when I went ahead and did that. So having done 50 marathons in Texas, that was my first goal. Then you add marathon in all 50 states, that got me up to 100 marathons. And then 7 continents, so that puts me now at least 107. And then the others were just, they were just out there.
One of the things that we've, I think, all seen a boom in is the cost, like you talked about. Back in 1982 or whatever, it was $5. Now, you can't find a marathon for under $100, right?
You can't.
Well, this one's $100.
Okay. But my point is that there's been a big boom that way. I guess, can you talk your perspective when you're looking to get these big races, organizations to invest money in the communities? Certainly in the African American community, that's one of the things, when you talk about, even for me, we're doing fine, and to try to justify, okay, I'm gonna pay, I got kids in college and whatnot, I'm gonna pay for this race that I wanna do, I'm gonna pay to go to China or do something, do these things. It's hard until, okay, we're empty nesters, but there's certainly a lot of talent in our community that aren't in a position even to consider a lot of the things that we're able to do. And I guess, what's your perspective?
It's funny when you go out to our website and you look at the achievers, and we have the individuals' ages, you'll find for a lot of the ones that were doing all the international stuff, it happened after their kids got out the house. And the way I like to look at it is, I'm not going to China to run a marathon. I'm going to China or wherever to actually tour the country. I'm just going to take a few hours out, literally to run a race. Like I said, I grew up in poverty, and one of the things that my dad told me after, of course, years later, he said, the cost of a plane ticket is the same for 1 week versus if you stay for 2 weeks. So my whole thing was, if I'm going to go overseas, I'm going to try to stay for 2 weeks and just really just take it all in, because the cost of the plane ticket is going to be the same. And I also literally give back to the community. So I go in and talk to, I've gone into halfway houses, talking to youth, talking to kids at different rec centers around the country. When we were in St. Louis, we talked to the students at Soldan High School. getting them to understand that it's not where you start, it's gonna be where you end up. So it's been a while since I've run a marathon. How many years has it been? I think it's been about 4 years since I ran a marathon. But I'm looking at running one later on this year. I'll be 70 years old. And my objective is to win an age group trophy as a 70-year-old. I have literally won one. I have literally.
I'm gonna beat you.
I'll be the youngest in that, I'll be the youngest in that particular age group. But for me, for every age group since I was 25, I have won trophies in marathons. Literally every 5-year age bracket since I was 25. And so I figure legs are still good. I can knock one out at 70 and retire again.
What is the fastest marathon you've ever run?
3 hours, 36 minutes, and some odd seconds.
Do you remember how old you were and which marathon that was?
It was White Rock Marathon, 1986. I was 29 years old, I think.
Okay.
One of the books that I was reading, they were saying that you can improve, regardless of when you start, you will improve for the first 5 years before you usually plateau and maybe start going downhill. And so I was actually trying to qualify for Boston. And so from the first weekend in July all the way through Thanksgiving, I was putting in an 18-mile run every single weekend. And got down there and could not qualify for Boston.
And you haven't qualified for Boston.
Right. I have not. I've gotten entries into Boston that I've given to other people.
Okay.
Because
It's tough.
Yeah, it's tough. My daughter got more out of running Boston than I ever would have gotten.
But I know this is, I'm walking on eggshells now because I'm getting more questions in, but at 69, what would your qualifying time have to be? I mean, maybe you could do it.
I have no idea, but I could not do it. So one of my things is
350. I think it's 350.
At 69?
For Boston.
Yeah.
For a man?
Yeah.
So one of my challenges has always been that I'm very muscular, and even when I ran my PR, I weighed over 200 pounds, but my body fat was less than 10%. And so the only way I was going to get faster was by losing weight, and I'd have to lose muscle. And I decided I didn't want to lose muscle.
Yeah, that sounds like a good decision. So the question that I was going to ask is, why Newport News? I know you said earlier, well, we travel around the country with the summit, but is there any particular reason why you chose Newport News this year?
Actually, Sika Henry. Sika had been asking us for years to come to Newport News. So she was a 2-time winner of Newport News Marathon. And when she won it when did we have this? 2015, I think. 2015 or 2017.
I think it's
2017, yeah, that she had won it, but at that time they didn't have a half marathon. All they had was a marathon.
And a
relay
and a 10K.
So they just got the half marathon maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And so we go all around the country. And on the off years that we don't have our Hall of Fame event, we like to pick something that's small so that our members can go to and just kind of get a different experience. So for some people, it's always New York, it's always Boston, it's always ones where there are a lot of crowds, but we've picked ones where we ordinarily would not go to. We did Deadwood Nicholson up in Deadwood, South Dakota one year, and people were saying,
That was a nice one.
why in the world?
Mount Rushmore?
Yes, Mount Rushmore was there. And a lot of us, always said, yeah, it'd be kind of cool to go to Mount Rushmore, but I never wanted to go by myself. So we did the marathon there. And it was a beautiful marathon. There were only 2 hills, right? The first hill was 22 miles. It really was.
It was true, you know, man.
And we were all sitting in the bar. Gills, we were all sitting in the bar after the marathon, and the board members are all there, and they're going, Tony, we will never ever let you pick a race again. Because their whole objective, as they were talking, they were saying, our whole objective is we don't want you to come in front of us. So I was the motivating factor, pushing them from the back to go ahead and finish the race.
We run through a cave, dark cave, no lights. A dark cave for about a mile, no lights.
Yeah. You know it's going to be a bad day when you hit the wall at 2 miles. And we did the Apache Junction. We did the Lost Dutchman Marathon in Apache Junction, Arizona, which that one started out in the desert in the dark.
Up in the mountains.
Yeah.
Had campfires and everything going on.
So Newport News this year.